My name is Valerie, a 28-year-old architect who thought family meant absolute loyalty until the most critical moment of my life. While I was fighting for survival in the intensive care unit on Christmas Eve, my own parents stood right outside my room, firmly refusing to cover any medical expenses. They loudly declared to the attending physician that a critically injured daughter was an unnecessary financial drain they simply refused to tolerate. My absolute despair peaked when I realized my biological parents were eagerly abandoning me just so they could free their hands to execute their dark personal agendas regarding my real estate assets. The devastating words echoed clearly through the hospital hallway when my father firmly stated, "Just leave her here because we cannot carry this burden anymore. Her house is the real issue that needs to be settled immediately." Meh. They walked away confident I would quietly fade out, allowing them to seize my multi-million-dollar property without any resistance. They entirely forgot about the disciplined old Marine who had always protected me since childhood. Before I reveal how one single phone call from my veteran grandfather triggered a massive legal retaliation that ultimately destroyed their greedy scheme, tell me in the comments what you think will happen next. Before the darkness engulfed my life in that intensive care unit, I had always been proud of the independent life I built in Boston. I spent countless sleepless nights establishing my demanding career as a professional architect to eventually purchase a classic property in the prestigious Beacon Hill neighborhood. Every single piece of vintage furniture, along with the valuable art collection inside that spacious house, was acquired through my own relentless dedication over the years. I poured my entire soul into designing a secure sanctuary for myself because I wanted a peaceful environment away from the chaotic demands of my daily professional obligations. I genuinely believed that achieving such financial stability would bring peace to my family, but it only triggered a deeply rooted greed within my parents. The dynamic with my family began shifting drastically when my mother Maud and my father started experiencing severe financial difficulties due to their reckless business decisions. They continuously pressured me to provide them with massive monetary loans under the guise of temporary emergencies that they clearly never intended to repay. Their visits to my home suddenly became much more frequent under the incredibly fake pretense of maintaining warm family affection. During those seemingly normal weekend dinners, I frequently caught Silas sneaking into my private home office, trying to locate my real estate ownership documents. He would quickly invent ridiculous excuses to change the subject whenever I directly questioned why his hands were aggressively shuffling through my confidential file cabinets. It became increasingly obvious that they were silently evaluating my total net worth rather than caring about my actual personal well-being. Everything culminated in a terrifying disaster while I was driving back from a late architectural site inspection on the freezing evening right before Christmas. The interstate highway was completely covered in dangerous black ice, causing my vehicle to skid completely out of control before violently colliding with the solid concrete median barrier. The crushing physical impact instantly shattered my windshield into thousands of pieces and left me trapped within the twisted metal frame of my own car for nearly an hour. The rescue team had to use heavy hydraulic equipment to extract my broken body before the paramedics eventually rushed me to the nearest hospital emergency room. My parents arrived at the medical facility shortly after receiving the critical police notification regarding my catastrophic accident. They certainly did not rush to the hospital room to hold my hand or anxiously ask the medical staff about my actual survival chances. A sympathetic nurse later documented that my parents spent their first few minutes beside my bleeding body, frantically digging through my personal handbag. They were aggressively searching for my wallet and desperately trying to find the security code to my home safe, instead of focusing on my rapidly deteriorating medical condition. They completely ignored the flashing monitors around my bed while they interrogated the trauma doctor about how quickly they could gain legal access to my bank accounts. Their primary concern was ensuring my assets would be transferred to their names without any legal complications. That devastating moment crystallized the horrific truth about the people who originally brought me into this world. I finally understood that my biological parents viewed their own daughter strictly as an emergency bank account designed specifically to fund their terrible financial mistakes. My entire existence only mattered to them as long as I could continue signing lucrative checks to sustain their comfortable upper-class lifestyle. Their ultimate goal was never my physical recovery, but rather the immediate and ruthless liquidation of everything I had worked so incredibly hard to build. The unconditional love I always thought we shared was nothing more than an elaborate illusion created to keep my wallet open for their endless, greedy demands. On the third day of my deep coma, my hearing suddenly awakened in a bizarre manner amidst the terrifyingly quiet atmosphere of the intensive care unit. I remained completely paralyzed on the hospital bed while my brain struggled to process the devastating reality unfolding right beside my pillows. My ears picked up every single chilling detail as Silas and Maud enthusiastically discussed their sinister scheme to completely drain the private trust fund that my late grandmother had specifically left for my future. Silas carelessly revealed to my mother that he currently owed $500,000 to several extremely dangerous underground loan sharks operating around the city. My father actually described my catastrophic winter car accident as a miraculous golden opportunity sent by fate to finally rescue him from his crushing financial obligations. His tone carried absolutely no parental grief or worry, while he aggressively calculated exactly how much liquid cash they could immediately extract from my personal banking accounts. He leaned slightly closer to my steady heart monitor and confidently whispered to my mother, "We only need to forge a few signatures for her, and this massive house will officially belong to us before this week even ends, Maud." Instead of showing any maternal horror at this blatant criminal suggestion, my mother coldly embraced his fraudulent strategy without demonstrating a single ounce of hesitation. Maud systematically persuaded Silas that they must execute the residential property sale immediately because she firmly believed I was a lost cause. She callously argued that even if I miraculously woke up from this severe trauma, I would likely remain severely disabled for the rest of my life. My mother completely convinced my father that a crippled woman would never need such a spacious historic property in the expensive Beacon Hill neighborhood anyway. She then stared directly at my unresponsive bleeding body and heartlessly muttered, "Exactly, the girl will never know what we actually did to her estate if she simply keeps lying perfectly still like this forever." They stood right beside my critical life support machines, outlining a meticulously detailed plan to completely forge my signature on several comprehensive power of attorney documents. This specific illegal paperwork would permanently grant Silas the absolute legal authority to officially manage all my valuable real estate assets along with my stock portfolios. They actively conspired to quickly hire a morally corrupt notary public who would falsely verify my conscious consent while I was literally fighting for every single breath in the trauma ward. Every word they spoke felt like a venomous blade piercing straight through my chest because I realized my physical survival was the biggest obstacle to their wealthy future. The absolute peak of their terrifying cruelty finally surfaced when they began casually complaining about the massive daily expenses accumulating from my critical medical treatments. Silas explicitly whined that keeping me hooked up to these highly expensive hospital machines would rapidly deplete the exact same wealth they were actively planning to steal. My own parents casually discussed the precise optimal timing for officially instructing the trauma doctors to pull the plug and terminate my life support completely. They mutually agreed that ending my life prematurely would easily be the most cost-effective solution if my unpredictable recovery process extended beyond their incredibly greedy patients. I was trapped inside my own broken physical shell, listening to the people who gave me life, plotting the exact financial terms of my impending death. They showed absolutely no hesitation discussing my potential funeral arrangements, simply to ensure the lucrative property transition would appear entirely natural to the local investigating authorities. Early the next morning, the heavy, authoritative footsteps of my grandfather Abraham shattered the suffocating tension echoing throughout the hospital corridor. The imposing former Marine immediately sensed something fundamentally wrong with the bizarre behavioral patterns displayed by Silas, along with Maud since my emergency admission. Abraham carried a deeply ingrained military discipline that allowed him to instantly detect the unnatural absence of genuine parental panic in their cold eyes. He closely observed how my parents awkwardly avoided making direct eye contact with the attending trauma surgeons whenever my critical condition was officially discussed. The veteran quietly noted how Silas constantly paced around the hospital waiting area, making suspicious phone calls instead of demanding frequent medical updates regarding his critically injured daughter. A highly explosive confrontation rapidly ignited right outside my intensive care unit when the seasoned veteran cornered his own son without showing any mercy. Abraham aggressively demanded to know why they were mysteriously disappearing from the waiting room while their only child remained trapped in a life-threatening coma. He stared directly into my father's shifting eyes, questioning loudly, "Silas, how do you precisely explain abandoning your own daughter here while she is literally fighting for her life every single second?" My father immediately started stammering uncontrollably, while frantically searching his empty mind for a somewhat plausible excuse to justify his undeniable paternal negligence. The tense atmosphere thickened significantly as the retired soldier physically blocked my parents from retreating toward the hospital elevator to escape his intense interrogation. Silas nervously rubbed the back of his sweating neck, mumbling pathetically, "Dad, you simply do not understand because we are merely trying to manage the external financial expenses to prepare for the absolute worst-case scenario." Abraham instantly rejected that disgusting rationalization by firmly marching straight toward the chief medical director to officially establish his absolute authority over my medical treatments. The retired soldier officially submitted his legally binding documentation, declaring himself as my primary healthcare proxy to directly prevent Silas from making any fatal medical decisions. This calculated tactical maneuver effectively blocked my parents from ever authorizing the premature termination of my life support systems without explicit approval from my grandfather. Abraham explicitly warned the medical staff that any attempt by my parents to alter my treatment protocols should be immediately reported to him as a direct violation of his legal proxy rights. 2 agonizing days slowly passed inside that dark mental prison before I finally managed to slightly twitch the paralyzed fingers on my left hand. My heavy eyelids fluttered open for the very first time, revealing the incredibly comforting sight of the old veteran standing guard beside my bed. I officially regained my full consciousness under the strict protection provided by the only family member who genuinely valued my physical survival above personal financial gain. The attending medical staff quickly rushed into my private room to conduct their comprehensive neurological evaluations, while Abraham fiercely guarded the entrance against any unwanted visitors. I desperately gathered every remaining ounce of my drastically depleted physical strength to whisper the horrifying truth about the sinister conversation I had secretly overheard. My trembling voice slowly detailed their exact malicious conspiracy regarding the forged power of attorney documents alongside their horrific plot to eventually pull my plug. The stoic expression on the old soldier instantly hardened into pure rage as he silently processed the unimaginable depths of his own son's treacherous greed. Abraham gently squeezed my fragile hand while internally vowing to formulate an utterly devastating legal counterattack that would permanently destroy their malicious financial ambitions. The seasoned veteran recognized that dealing with such profound familial betrayal required absolute precision rather than emotional outbursts to successfully protect my remaining inheritance. He promised me right then that Silas would face severe legal consequences for daring to treat my vulnerable existence as a disposable financial asset. That very evening, my hospital room officially transformed into a highly classified tactical operations center under the strict supervision of Abraham. My lawyer, Quentin, secretly arrived under the cover of darkness carrying a heavy briefcase filled with highly crucial legal documents requiring my immediate authorization. He meticulously laid out the comprehensive paperwork necessary to permanently transfer my entire estate into an impenetrable, irrevocable trust protected strictly by United States property law. I systematically signed multiple official directives to completely revoke any previous financial access or medical proxy rights that Silas or Maud might attempt to maliciously exploit. We methodically established an absolute legal barrier explicitly designed to prevent my parents from executing any unauthorized residential sales regarding my valuable historic properties. The sheer volume of legally binding contracts required my undivided attention to ensure absolutely no loopholes remained for my desperate family members to utilize. I looked directly at my trusted attorney while gripping the pen firmly to state, "Quentin, I want to ensure that not a single penny of mine can be touched by Silas or Maud, even if I am no longer in this world." Quentin solemnly nodded while efficiently notarizing the freshly signed documents to finalize the impenetrable legal shield, securing my lifelong architectural achievements. Meanwhile, Abraham actively utilized his extensive network of former military intelligence contacts to silently investigate the terrifying depths of my father's hidden financial disasters. The retired veteran systematically gathered concrete documentary evidence proving Silas was deeply entangled with extremely dangerous underground loan sharks demanding immediate massive cash payments. He printed out numerous illicit transaction records detailing exactly how my father had desperately promised my private assets as illegal collateral for his mounting gambling debts. The sheer magnitude of his financial ruin confirmed exactly why my parents were so incredibly desperate to liquidate my entire portfolio without any hesitation. Abraham reviewed the alarming credit reports on his encrypted tablet before confidently assuring me, "Rest assured, Valerie, this trap has already been set. We are merely waiting for them to walk right into it themselves." We mutually agreed that successfully executing this defensive strategy required me to deliver a thoroughly convincing theatrical performance regarding my current neurological condition. I had to deliberately feign severe cognitive confusion, along with an extremely slow physical recovery whenever my parents bothered to visit the intensive care unit. Faking profound memory loss would perfectly encourage Silas and Maud to become dangerously overconfident, while they foolishly plunged much deeper into the meticulous legal snare we had just prepared. Quentin collaborated closely with me to covertly activate a highly sophisticated remote alert protocol linked directly to the hidden security cameras installed throughout my Beacon Hill residence. This advanced surveillance network was explicitly programmed to immediately record and securely transmit high-definition footage, capturing every single unauthorized entry my father attempted at my private property. We meticulously verified the digital connection, ensuring that any movement inside my personal home office would instantly trigger a silent alarm directly to my attorney's secure corporate servers. Every calculated step Silas took inside my empty house, while unlawfully searching for valuable assets, would now become undeniable digital evidence of his criminal trespassing intentions. We spent several additional hours carefully reviewing the specific legal statutes regarding fraudulent conveyance to guarantee my parents would face maximum judicial penalties for their impending theft. Quentin assured me that unauthorized attempts to sell properties held within an irrevocable trust constituted a severe federal offense carrying mandatory prison sentences. The overwhelming feeling of betrayal slowly transformed into a cold determination as I watched my protective legal fortress solidify around the remaining fragments of my shattered life. I felt profoundly grateful knowing my grandfather and my attorney were constructing an inescapable reality where greedy betrayers would finally face the absolute destruction of their own terrible choices. 2 days later, Silas and Maud appeared at my hospital room wearing fake expressions of concern with a thick folder clamped tightly under their arms. My father slowly approached my bedside, utilizing a disgustingly sweet tone to manipulate my compromised emotional state. Silas gently placed the dense stack of papers directly on my lap, claiming they were merely standard medical insurance forms required by the hospital administration. I instantly recognized the complex legal formatting, indicating these were actually the comprehensive power of attorney documents he had meticulously prepared beforehand. Maud stood nervously near my bed, silently encouraging his deceitful actions while pretending to wipe imaginary tears from her eyes. Silas leaned intimately close, offering a plastic pen while softly whispering, "You just need to sign right here. All the hospital bills will be resolved smoothly, and you will not have to worry about anything anymore, Valerie." I deliberately maintained my theatrical performance by feigning extreme physical exhaustion while letting my hands violently tremble against the white hospital blankets. My fingers continuously fumbled with the plastic pen until it clumsily dropped onto the linoleum floor, completely out of my immediate reach. This calculated display of severe physical weakness caused Silas to completely lose his carefully crafted paternal patience right before my watchful eyes. He aggressively grabbed my right wrist, intending to forcefully press my bare thumb onto a hidden ink pad to physically stamp my fingerprint onto his fraudulent paperwork. The terrifying intensity burning in his eyes revealed a monstrous greed that entirely eclipsed any lingering remnants of natural parental affection he might have ever possessed. His tightening grip sent sharp pain radiating through my injured arm, but I steadfastly refused to surrender. Right at the absolute peak of this horrifying physical confrontation, the attending trauma physician abruptly pushed the heavy wooden door wide open. The dedicated medical professional had been previously instructed by Abraham to closely monitor the surrounding hallway for any signs of escalating familial distress. The doctor immediately marched toward my bed with absolute professional authority to physically separate my enraged father from my fragile, resting body. He glared sternly at both of my parents while pointing toward the exit and firmly stating, "Excuse me, both of you, it is time for the patient to receive her medication, and absolute rest. I must ask you to step outside immediately." Silas angrily snatched his unexecuted documents off my lap before reluctantly marching out of the intensive care unit alongside my visibly frustrated mother. Being permanently thwarted from acquiring my legitimate signature pushed my father into making an incredibly reckless financial gamble out of pure desperation. Silas brazenly decided to completely accelerate his illegal liquidation timeline by distributing exclusive auction invitations to numerous elite art collectors throughout the Boston metropolitan area. He fully intended to unlawfully transform my prestigious Beacon Hill sanctuary into an underground trading floor to rapidly satisfy his dangerous underground creditors. Maud actively assisted him by contacting various wealthy acquaintances to guarantee a highly profitable turnout for their impending criminal enterprise. Later that afternoon, Quentin and Abraham sat quietly inside my hospital room, thoroughly reviewing the live digital feeds transmitting from my residential security network. We watched the high-definition monitors in absolute silence as Silas arrogantly marched through my front doors to unlawfully appraise my valuable interior furnishings. My grandfather methodically documented every single unauthorized entry, while Quentin continuously compiled the mounting digital evidence of my father committing blatant criminal trespassing. Silas foolishly paraded around my living room, confidently introducing himself to various hired appraisers as the sole legitimate owner of my entire architectural estate. We patiently gathered the irrefutable visual proof necessary to guarantee his impending financial destruction, while he blindly continued digging his own inescapable legal grave. That weekend, the historic house in Beacon Hill blazed brightly with brilliant lights explicitly serving the bottomless greed of Silas and Maud. Silas stood incredibly confidently in the absolute center of my spacious living room, elegantly holding a crystal glass of expensive champagne. He boldly projected his voice across the crowded space, loudly introducing himself to the wealthy attendees as my sole legitimate legal heir. My father delivered a sickeningly rehearsed speech, claiming he desperately needed to rapidly liquidate these assets to secure funding for his severely disabled daughter. He painted a completely tragic picture of my medical situation while actively negotiating the illegal sale of my most valuable interior possessions. Maud walked cheerfully around the crowded room, displaying a remarkably warm smile while actively encouraging elite collectors to purchase my precious artistic acquisitions. My mother shamelessly paraded the rare international artifacts I had painstakingly gathered from across the globe over my entire professional architectural career. She eagerly negotiated incredibly lucrative cash transactions with various unsuspecting buyers who genuinely believed they were participating in a completely legitimate estate liquidation. The absolute climax of this horrific betrayal erupted violently when the heavy mahogany front doors suddenly swung wide open, catching everyone completely off guard. I unexpectedly appeared right at the main entrance, sitting upright in a customized medical wheelchair while breathing steadily without any life support machines. Abraham stood majestically right behind me, pushing the heavy metal chair while wearing his impeccably decorated formal Marine Corps dress uniform. The distinguished military veteran radiated an overwhelming aura of absolute authority that instantly paralyzed every single wealthy buyer lingering inside my personal sanctuary. I stared directly at my utterly terrified parents before projecting my recovering voice clearly across the dead silent room to shatter their criminal illusion. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair firmly and loudly declared, "Welcome everyone to my house, but I am afraid this fraudulent party of Silas must end right here." The wealthy attendees instantly froze in absolute shock, dropping their auction catalogs onto the hardwood floor upon realizing the supposed dying owner was actively speaking. Silas physically staggered backward, dropping his crystal champagne glass, which immediately shattered into countless sharp pieces across my expensive imported rug. His face drained of all natural color while his greedy eyes frantically darted around the enclosed space, desperately searching for an impossible escape route. I wheeled myself slightly forward, closing the physical distance between us to confront the man who actively conspired to steal my entire livelihood. I looked deep into his terrified eyes and coldly asked, "Dad, did you actually think the irrevocable trust that Abraham established was just set up for fun?" A deadly silence instantly enveloped the massive living room as my undeniable revelation completely destroyed his carefully constructed facade of paternal tragedy. I loudly announced to the bewildered wealthy guests that every single auction document presented tonight was completely forged by my desperately indebted parents. I explicitly clarified that my entire historic property had already been permanently secured within an impenetrable legal entity. Before Silas could formulate any pathetic excuse to defend his blatant criminal actions, Quentin confidently emerged from the shadows of the entrance hallway. My dedicated attorney marched purposefully into the well-lit living room, accompanied by several fully uniformed officers from the Boston Police Department. Quentin officially presented an emergency arrest warrant directly to my trembling father, citing multiple severe felony charges including massive fraud and grand larceny. The armed police officers quickly surrounded Silas alongside Maud to officially detain them for actively conspiring to misappropriate large-scale assets right at the crime scene. The investigating detectives efficiently confiscated all the fraudulent auction paperwork my parents had illegally distributed while systematically escorting the bewildered buyers out of the premises. I sat quietly in my wheelchair, watching the harsh metallic handcuffs firmly lock around the wrists of the greedy individuals who ultimately chose money over their own flesh and blood. 2 months after those horrifying events, the ghosts of betrayal had been completely banished from my life, without any remaining traces of their negative influence. Silas ultimately faced a lengthy prison sentence after the federal prosecutors officially indicted him for severe financial fraud and attempted grand larceny involving my architectural estate. Maud was thoroughly humiliated during the highly publicized criminal trial and found herself permanently exiled from the prestigious Boston high society she had always worshipped throughout her incredibly superficial life. The catastrophic collapse of his fraudulent residential schemes forcefully pushed my father into declaring absolute bankruptcy while the underground creditors ruthlessly seized his remaining properties. Silas lost absolutely everything he ever owned and was forced into a truly pathetic existence where his former wealthy business associates treated him like a contagious disease. He spent his miserable days hiding in a dilapidated suburban apartment, continuously dodging the furious debt collectors who persistently hunted down his unpaid underground loans across the city. Maud desperately attempted to distance herself from the legal fallout, but the undeniable digital evidence Quentin collected ensured she faced severe judicial consequences for her active participation. She ultimately ended up working a minimum-wage retail job just to survive, while permanently carrying the unbearable shame of publicly attempting to rob her own hospitalized daughter. I officially instructed Quentin to execute the necessary legal procedures to permanently sever all biological and financial ties with the toxic people who callously betrayed me. I deliberately established an impenetrable legal boundary, ensuring my greedy parents could never again demand monetary support or claim any familial rights regarding my future endeavors. I proudly decided to allocate a significant portion of my architectural wealth to establish a supportive foundation for disabled veterans, strictly honoring the noble wishes of Abraham. The peaceful sanctuary inside my Beacon Hill home was finally restored to its original glory, where genuine loyalty and unwavering military discipline completely replaced their toxic greed. I continued my rigorous physical rehabilitation under the vigilant protection of the seasoned veteran who consistently prioritized my actual physical survival over any superficial material wealth. We established a deeply rewarding life together, actively celebrating authentic familial love instead of the rotten illusions my parents had so desperately tried to maintain throughout my entire childhood. Abraham taught me that genuine honor is actively demonstrated through protective actions rather than empty promises whispered by individuals eagerly waiting to steal your hard-earned inheritance. Looking back at the agonizing nightmare I survived, I clearly realized that a biological family is not always the guaranteed safe haven. Society constantly pretends it is. There are terrifying moments when blind greed possesses the fragile human soul, turning the exact people who share your bloodline into your absolute worst and most dangerous enemies. The most expensive lesson I learned from this profound betrayal is the absolute necessity of equipping yourself with comprehensive legal knowledge alongside complete financial independence early in life. Maintaining absolute control over your own personal assets serves as the only sufficiently sharp weapon to keep yourself standing firm against the most cruel and unexpected familial schemes. Offering your unconditional forgiveness only possesses genuine meaning when it is explicitly granted to honorable individuals who actually deserve your grace through their sincere protective actions. Resolutely protecting your own life against manipulative emotional abuse and physical exploitation is simply basic survival and should never be considered a selfish or unforgivable sin. I sincerely thank you all for accompanying my difficult journey and patiently listening to my deeply personal story until these final passing minutes. If you firmly believe that the decisive actions executed by me and Abraham were entirely correct, please share your honest thoughts down in the comments section so we can actively discuss this together. I strongly look forward to seeing all of you again in our upcoming narrative videos very